I thought yes, because I'm a meat between these two pieces of bread, and I thought most likely James would be a bit history, and I hope Chris is going to talk a little bit about more science. So I'm just going to put some personal views of what's happening, how I see my role at North Shore Hospital, and how it's going to link with the staff that is now looking after hematology and the transplant at North Shore Hospital, as well as where I'm at St. Vincent's. So this is a famous picture that James has shown you already, and that is the old North Shore Hospital. Is now totally demolished. I can't squeeze it down, but that's okay. Sideways we do. At least you can see me. Don't worry about it. I don't. Better to see me rather than see the behind the screen. And now it's totally demolished. And this is, I have to be very, have to say in the public that I'm very grateful that James was the chief around the time in the mid-1980s, because I just finished my training and also a bit of overseas research and looking for jobs. And James is the first one that offered me a job. So that's, and that you can see that that's around the time, and he's thinking about things already. And you see the hat there. He's trying to collect money, getting ready for start his new unit. So now that's what you call planning. And that's number one. Number two is that also my history with James go back a little bit as well. He was also my mentor, and a mentor in the apheresis area, and I will come back to that later. And after I've been at North Shore for a couple of years, then Chris finished his overseas work for a couple of years and then came back. And then we formed the triad, almost. I was going to say musketeers, but I thought this is more sexy, triad. And we are now in the bunker and just planning what we're going to do and how we're going to expand and build a hematology department and bone marrow transplant unit. And one of the early jobs that have been organized was the opening of the day treatment center, because this is vital as a link so the patient doesn't have to be in hospital all the time. And this is one of our early patients that we treated and have used the daycare. And I'm sure some of you will remember she's one of our early nursing sister who runs the apheresis machine as well. So that's the building up the team. And I just come back the lessons I learned from James, who was my mentor, is that the use of the apheresis machine. James used it as a therapeutic, but with the training that I got from him, I developed different skills. And I'm using the machine to look at how we can use it for bone marrow transplantation, including depleting T cells, ABO incompatibility, isolating the cells into just pure mononuclear cells that it's not even red, and also as well as looking at how we can develop cryopreservation of stem cells in a systemic way. And with that lessons learned and the skill I developed, I was able to bring this to North Shore Hospital when James said, yes, that's the time to go. So that's how we started the transplant, and initially with the autologous. So applying my skill and also at the same time training staff. And as you can see that in those days, we are jack of all trades. So we do the processing in the lab, at the same time training a research scientist. Mind you, it's not even, there's no one we're employed as a scientist to do stem cell research or stem cell transplant. And also doing cryopreservations, and sometimes go to midnight if there's any problems with the preservation process. So, and around the time when I joined the team, I think James has mentioned already the 4 members, and the other 2 was involved in hematology. It's one Dr. Lau, and the other one is Keith Jones. Now I mentioned Keith Jones, the pioneer, which James already, and that because he's really started the process of the concept about bone marrow transplant. I didn't even know. I thought it was 1970s, but he actually started in 1960s. So almost around the time when Donald Thomas started his transplant experiments in the world, and eventually he won the Nobel Prize for it. So he's really a visionary, like Keith in that sense. But the science wasn't there, and that's why he wasn't successful. It's almost 20 years later before the science caught up with the concept. So one of the early transplant patients is here, and as you can see that, you know, in those days you had to be jack of all trades. As I said, you know, you work in the lab, you work in the office, and you're planning, and also you work and look after the patient as well. And because of this one, I have developed a multitasking skill that I've been able to carry on even to today. I really appreciate the training, as I said, that I received while I was working there. So I just want to talk about some of the peoples, right? I want to just a bit of personal touch. There's a few famous people that gone past a North Shore Hospital while I was there. See one of these. I'm doing the stem cell infusion for the patient. And by the way, he's not sticking his finger up against us. It's just because it's oxygen saturation measurement. And he was very happy afterwards, too, I can guarantee. And that's Cameron Turtle, and as people in bone marrow transplant area knows very well. He's very well known internationally as a transplanter and also as a researcher in the area of bone marrow transplantation. And he's now based in Seattle in USA. And see the handsome young man over there, and he's John Moore, and I come back to John Moore later because he's now one of my working comrades, if you want to put it this way, at St. Vincent's. And the other important thing is that in those days, just look at this. We have our laboratory on one side and our office over here. And so much about occupational health and all those things. It's all down the drain. And in a way, it's quite convenient in the sense is that we can move from one place to another without too much hindrance. And nowadays you have to gun up and gun down and all the other things, and if you step the wrong foot away and then someone will say, oh, no, not there. So the other one is that nursing staff and laboratory staff are fantastic. That's the part I enjoy going to work when I was at North Shore Hospital. And occasionally we have serious things like all listening to lectures with the lab staff there, and someone may be behind, might be dozing off as well, especially if I'm talking. And then nice thing is that occasionally when we want a bit of release our anxiety or whatever, then we go out and have a few drinks together and let off our steam. And it's interesting, I'm pleased that Yvonne turned up, and look at that, you haven't changed that much, Yvonne. Gee, you know, what is your secret? Wow, look at me, my hair. Okay, all right. Now, talking about the part of the early days is really bone marrow transplant. We always do this, but nowadays you use stem cells. The reason I mentioned this is that about Roger. Why I call Roger a kingpin in bone marrow harvest. The real story is that because Roger is a fantastic chef. And he makes beautiful cakes. And he always, whenever he goes to the operating theater, he always bring one in. So the nurses and the anesthetists loved him. And every time when we have an emergency and Roger pick up the phone and say, look, can I have this? They would say, Roger, anytime. And this is for one occasion, he's not eating his own food, and I don't know whether he enjoyed it or not, but probably my cooking. I'm sorry, Roger. So coming back to the time when bone marrow transplant started moving from just collecting bone marrow stem cells to peripheral blood stem cells. One of the problems is that to develop an assay that's suitable for a fast turnaround time, and that's the beginning of the 1990s. And I have Annabella Chang from I think from Westmead Hospital, joined us. And at that stage, I was still doing cultures, and it takes 7 to 14 days, and it's impossible to estimate how much stem cell you need to collect while the person is on the machine. And you can see I break another rule of health hazard and all these things. I'm not even wearing a glove or wearing a gown. And I can explain that I'm not wearing a gown probably it's because they want to take a picture. You can see the pose, right? I don't really act like this normally. Then, back one, okay, back one, easy, okay. Now, then around the time, then we have used the flow cytometry, and that's make a big difference because you can get the result within a few hours. And Annabella and I started looking and discover everyone using the method differently. There was no concordance. And when we did the first survey, you can see that 50% of the people doing the estimation are out of the normal range, than what we expected. So that's how the beginning of us starting garage sort of workshop type of quality control type of network. And I will come back to this, what happened to this backyard type of quality control program to now, to the current ones. And this is Luke Coyle, and I noticed that Luke Coyle, the color of his hair has changed in the last few years, and this is one of our patients. So it's inevitable, as James said, we see the patient day in and day out. We look at the molecules, we come to discuss with them, and we talk about the family. So we're taking a very holistic approach. And therefore, sometimes, whether we like it or not, we can get involved with the person. And so this is one of the occasions where this is a young lady who actually had the ribbon cut for the opening of the daycare center, and this is her when she was a mother, about 15 years later, I think. And this is another patient of ours who had a bone marrow transplant, and he's making a trick on us and say, "What did you transplant to me?" And for someone, and I thought that was fantastic. I said, I wish we can do that, but nowadays we can using iPS cells, but not in those days. So what are the other people? And this is an interesting one as well. As I mentioned, is the family affair. And there was a time when the patient was having induction chemotherapy. And the picture was taken by his son, who was a student, want to be a journalist. And then what happened then, after she recovered from a bone marrow transplant, and he was just beginning to become a journalist with one of the major newspapers. And I am pleased to say that she's still alive, well, and happy with the family. So I've talked so much about autologous bone marrow transplant, and I just want to mention allogeneic bone marrow transplant. Alan, who is in the audience here, is Alan Dean. After transplant, a few years later, then I always try to avoid too much doctor and patient contact because I just feel that I might not be able to do things objectively if I get too involved. But it was a few years down the track. I thought, well, time to relax. So I got his invitation to go to his farm, and there was a drought. So I learned a lot about how to feed animals during the drought time, and therefore I learned a new skill, including, if Alan might remember, one of his calf was injured, and I was at the middle of the night. Alan have a torch, and I stitch up his calf, and I can tell you that the hide is tough. I have to use a pair of pliers to get the needle through and then fix it, and the calf survived. So that's now fine-tuning my skill. And talking about fine-tuning, Alan said, look, I got a roof there, I need to be fixed. So I said, okay, this is a good fine-tuning my bone marrow harvest skill. And obviously, we use different instruments for operating theater. But nonetheless, it's no harm. So the other part is that it also opened opportunities to collaborate with people internationally. And one of the great things that I was at North Shore Hospital is that James and Keith and everyone else have open arms for visitors coming overseas, and we hence have a lot of contacts. That's including this doctor from Japan, one from China, and one from Belgium. And because of this contact, therefore, I was able to see how other people work, especially around our regions. And that led to one of my invitation to go to Taiwan. And that's me right there. We don't all look the same, so I have to look more carefully. And I apologize to those of my race, like Keith Fay at the back. And that's opened my eyes about what's happening outside, and I would like to come back to this later. So the final part about in the 1990s is that people think telehealth is new thing, and James and Chris probably remember this is the first demonstration of the possibility of telehealth that we did between Belgium. You can see I was there visiting one of our Belgian doctors that was with us a year or so ago, and televised a teleconference with James here, Chris Arthur, and Bob Ravage. And it's not just beaming the discussion. At the same time, we have a microscope. We have the television onto the microscope and beam the blood film all the way across to Europe. So this is what I call the proof of principle was there more than 20 years ago. So that is an attribute to North Shore Hematology Department as well. And like the Belgian French, they got a bottle of champagne ready, and if it's successful, I can have a sip. If it's not, then no one can touch it. So obviously, you know by now that whether I had a drink or not. So I just, in the last few slides, I just thought that, okay, this is what happened in the 1980s, and a couple of decades later, look at beautiful North Shore Hospital. From this old building where the bricks were falling down, and now into a lovely first-class center in the world. And so what happened to myself? And am I still have any link to North Shore Hospital? So I'm just going to give 3 examples that our link still exists with the existing staff here. The first one is that is the telehealth. This is Matthew Greenwood, who is now, my apology, Matthew, I could not find a more recent photo of you. So, but I'm sure you'll be happy with this one, won't you, Matthew?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Right.
That's good.
Yeah, thanks. And
about 45.
And he and I collaborate, and we are doing probably the world first randomized control trial of using internet-based physical and mental exercise program for the post-transplant patients to try to see whether we can improve their quality of life. And this is an example where we train one patient here, and with another one, we only have one face-to-face meeting. The rest will be all done on the internet. And then to make sure they can cross-talk, etc. And I'm pleased that Matthew and I have just completed recruiting 140 patients over a couple of years' time, and hopefully I will be able to analyze the result with not too distant future. And I hope that's an exciting partnership between me, who was ex-North Shore person, with the current ones. The second one is the one that about hematopoietic stem cell estimation. That was in the 1990s in a workshop, I mean backyard sort of workshop, and now it's been taken up by the College of Pathologists as an international quality assurance program. We have 60 centers around the world participate in this quality program, and Annabella and I are still one of the scientific advisory members. As a matter of fact, Annabella and I was meeting yesterday, going to launch a new test looking at not just CD34, but looking at live CD34 cells. The final part is the lesson I learned about working with people and understanding people in overseas and collaboration. Let me explain the reasons why this has occurred. If you look at the bone marrow transplant per center, per country, look at Australia, it's about 300. And around our regions, if you look at the gray area, they're 0. Like these 3 places, that one is Sri Lanka, the second one is Myanmar, and the third one is Philippines. So that means they are really way behind. And what that means is that there's an unmet need within our region. So we have, together with some of the ex-North Shore boys, like Sam Milliken, meeting the health minister of Myanmar in 2013, invited by the Professor G, so that to help them to set up transplant units over there. And with this handsome man, John Moore, with all the nurses rushing and flooding and want to shake hands with him, John and I have also started, as you might recall, John is one of the young budding transplanters when he joined North Shore Hospital, and then eventually we worked together at St. Vincent's. And we set up the first transplant center in the Sri Lankan National Cancer Institute. And more recently, we have also taken up the challenge to help the people in Philippines so that they will have a transplant program for every Filipino in need. And that I quote from what one of the doctors in Philippines said that. So there's a lot of hurdles that we have to overcome, but together with the people that we're helping, we hope we will get through. So I've given 3 examples of what I have learned and the skills that I acquired when I was at North Shore Hospital, and bring it to the current and in the near future, what we are doing with what I've learned, etc. So I'd just like to thank everyone.